I had been careful with my money, saving every penny for years, imagining the freedom it would bring me someday. But that night, my parents stormed into my room, voices sharp and urgent. My brother had done it again, another gambling spree, another massive debt. They looked at me, not with understanding or concern for my hard work, but with expectation, as if my savings existed solely to bail him out. I felt my chest tighten. The unfairness of it struck like a physical blow. I had sacrificed, scrimped, and planned while he had squandered without consequence. And now my parents demanded I pay the price for his recklessness. Their eyes were pleading, but there was no doubt. If I refused, I would be painted as selfish, ungrateful, and cold. Hey, if you enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the bell. Your support means everything and helps me keep creating. Thank you so much. I sat in silence, the weight of years of hard work pressing down. A part of me wanted to comply, to ease the tension, to maintain the fragile peace. But another part, stronger, surer, refused. I realized I had reached the point where I could no longer allow myself to be exploited. I could no longer let their favoritism and his irresponsibility dictate my life. I looked at my parents and spoke firmly, my voice trembling but steady. I would not give them my savings. They gasped, faces flushed with anger and disbelief. I could see the shock ripple through my brother, who had never seen me stand up to him like this before. For the first time, the balance of power shifted, and I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, control over my own life. That night, as they left my room, muttering threats and warnings, I realized this confrontation was only the beginning. I had drawn a line, and crossing it would have consequences. But deep down, I knew I had finally chosen myself over the endless cycle of debt, manipulation, and favoritism that had defined my family for so long. And I wasn't about to look back. The following days were tense, almost suffocating. My parents avoided looking me in the eyes, their disappointment simmering beneath forced civility. My brother, once cocky and untouchable, now cast quick, nervous glances at me, realizing that for the first time, his actions had consequences beyond empty threats. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and anxiety. Standing up for myself had shifted the balance, but it had also lit a fuse I knew could explode at any moment. I kept my routine, but every interaction was charged. My parents tried subtle manipulation, mentions of sacrifice, of family loyalty, hints at the pain I had caused by refusing. They tried to guilt me, reminding me of the childhood favors they had done for me, of the times they had helped me, but I stayed silent, listening, observing. I cataloged every word, every glance, every attempt to bend me back into compliance. Each tactic only strengthened my resolve. Then came the escalation. One night, I overheard my brother on the phone, panic in his voice. He had borrowed more money from dangerous people, assuming my parents would once again cover him. But this time, without my savings, the safety net he relied on had vanished. My stomach twisted as I realized the storm I had anticipated was now very real. My parents argued behind closed doors, their voices sharp, accusing me of cruelty, of being the reason for his worsening situation. I didn't respond, didn't intervene, but I watched carefully. And that's when I discovered the truth I hadn't expected. My parents, despite their fury at me, had no plan. They couldn't cover the debt themselves. They had counted entirely on me. My refusal had forced a reckoning they weren't prepared for. It wasn't just my brother who had underestimated the consequences. It was them too. At that moment, I realized I held the leverage, not just over my savings, but over the entire dynamic that had allowed my brother's reckless behavior to go unchecked. I could see the fear in my brother's eyes, the helplessness in my parents' voices when they realized their schemes were crumbling. They had always believed I was compliant, malleable, easily manipulated. But standing firm had changed everything. I made a decision. I would not simply resist. I would protect myself and ensure my brother faced responsibility for his own actions. I arranged meetings with the creditors, explaining calmly that the debt had to be managed by him, not me. I sought legal advice, understanding the potential consequences, but also recognizing my right to defend what was mine. Every step was deliberate, calculated. By the end of the week, my brother's panic turned to anger, then resignation. My parents' pleas shifted from threats to negotiations, their tone softer, almost pleading. They realized that I was no longer the child who would bend to their will, and that realization terrified them. I watched it all, knowing that this was a turning point, not just for me, but for the entire family dynamic. For the first time, I felt the weight of true autonomy. I wasn't just refusing to give my savings. I was breaking a pattern that had defined my family for years. I wasn't just defending my money. I was defending my right to exist on my own terms, free from manipulation and exploitation. And in that realization, I found a strength I hadn't known I possessed, a strength my brother and my parents would never forget. That night, as I sat alone in my room, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The tension in the house had not disappeared, but the power balance had shifted irrevocably. I had chosen myself over the endless cycle of enabling and exploitation, and the consequences, though unsettling, were proof that change was finally possible. I was no longer trapped by their expectations, no longer bound by their demands, and for the first time, I could see a path forward where I was in control. The following days were tense, but quietly satisfying. My brother avoided me entirely, walking on eggshells, realizing for the first time that I was no longer a safety net for his reckless choices. My parents, once so confident and controlling, moved cautiously around me, their words measured, their eyes wary. The shift was palpable. Finally, the family dynamic had changed, and I could feel the power balance tilting. I continued with my life as usual, keeping my finances intact, paying my bills, and focusing on my work. My parents tried subtle manipulation, reminders of sacrifices, and family loyalty, but I stayed firm. Every plea, every guilt trip only reinforced my resolve. They could see that the person they had always underestimated had grown into someone unyielding. A week later, my brother came to me, panicked, seeking advice on handling the debt he had assumed I would cover. I refused to hand over my money. Instead, I guided him on taking responsibility, negotiating with creditors, and facing the consequences of his actions. It was painful and humiliating for him, but necessary. I had chosen accountability over enabling, proving that respect had to be earned, not demanded. My parents watched, their expressions a mix of awe and unease. They realized their control over me was gone. I was no longer the child they could bend, manipulate, or guilt into compliance. The person they dismissed as weak, useless, or incapable had become someone they had to respect. That night, I felt a profound sense of liberation. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my life, asserting my boundaries, and ending the cycle of favoritism and exploitation that had defined our family for years. I had chosen myself, finally, and the consequences of that choice rippled through the family, changing everything forever.